Thank you for staying with us on the program. Well, of course, we were talking about the economy, and now we just round up in a few minutes and we go into the issues of anti-corruption fight by the federal government-led Muhammadu Buhari administration. Of course, some of my studio audience are talking very heated debate when we went on that break. Let me quickly bring one or two people in the audience. Let me start with Mukhtar on the issue. Okay, let me start with Ayo Oyalawo. You were a former banker, and the party APC made several promises, and I'm very sure some of your friends will be asking, some of these promises are not coming to pass.
Well, the president said something during the last interview he had, and it was like, we knew things were bad, but we didn't know they were this bad. And
That's been said for almost a year.
Let me explain, please. Dr. Obi just said something clearly here. And I remember when she made that intervention in 2013 in the university, when she gave a speech of how 67 billion, that's 45 in foreign reserves and 22 in ECA, was wasted. And she said again now, which I agree with, that we should have, with the boom, raised the bar. If we had done that, perhaps we would not be talking like this today. Now, the truth is, the president came premised on three broad scope: economy, anti-corruption, and war against terrorism as at that time. And of course, we now have a multidimensional war that is being fought. But the truth is, the challenge of the economy rests on even the people at times. For instance, at a time, I think about 2 months ago, we had electricity up to about 5,000 plus megawatts, which was the highest we ever had. But suddenly, some people woke up and decided to start bombing pipelines. Who do you blame? The president again? I mean, it's easy to throw everything and say, you promise this, you promise that. But what really are the people themselves doing to better their lives? And sorry, I need to correct an impression. When the president came in, the first place he actually visited in Nigeria was South-South, which was Cross River State in Calabar. So let us try and, when you're on air, let us always make sure whatever you are saying is the truth at all times.
Let's come back to my guest now. Anti-corruption was a major one when President Muhammadu Buhari came into office. He said he was going to be, he was asked by a colleague of mine, what would you like to be remembered for as the president of Nigeria? And he said, he would like to be remembered as a president who fought corruption to his nails. But does it look like a one-sided fight since the last year?
I listen to people talk about one-sided fights, and I've always said that, look, when I was in government, we also were accused of a one-sided fight. So any time that an administration would try to tackle corruption, it would definitely face those kinds of accusations. And so what becomes important is for the agencies that are engaged in that fight to do a risk management analysis on the basis of which they take on the cases that they would fight, so that it would help them ensure that the most important critical cases are tackled head-on. And in that process, it would not appear lopsided. I think that the key issue is anyone who is being made to answer to criminality, did they engage in criminality? That really should be the operating model, right? Yeah. That did you engage in criminality? So whether you are part of an opposition or you're part of the ruling party, it doesn't matter. Did you engage in criminality? Should be the basis on which we as a society agree that we must sanction corruption. And then on the anti-corruption effort, there is a link, a very strong link, a correlation between fighting corruption and ensuring that an economy functions on the basis of incentives of the market. For example, when we look at the challenges we've had in the petroleum sector, there's the kind of deregulation that happens. It prevents the occurrence of corruption. So if you want to tackle corruption, it's not just about if you can reduce the opportunities for corruption, then you basically would have less number of corruptions that you need to have the EFCC running about to tackle, right? So structural issues in the economy, those distortions that we find in sectors like petroleum, that we find in the in monetary policy, especially foreign exchange, why should we have two markets? There is absolutely no reason for it. So we need to bring convergence. And I think that, you know, when you say that the president says that he's not been convinced as to what value devaluation has done for economies, I think that our president is going to be better served by his economic team, giving him as much economic data as possible. There is nothing like economic evidence. When a president has economic evidence, they can make those kinds of decisions and choices in better ways. A particular gentleman that reminds me in some ways, based on his nationalism of our president, is Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew was not a man given to, you know, any fad in town. He was a very hard-nosed leader. And so one of the things that helped him a lot was to adopt an approach of economic pragmatism. So economic pragmatism came by virtue of putting a lot of emphasis on analytical evidence, on empirical evidence. So he would look at it, and he would see what the facts are saying to him. So he looked at some of his neighboring countries in Asia and saw some of the policies that ordinarily, as someone who says Singapore has to be a strong nation, that does not look at what other people do. But when he looked at the economic facts on the table, he realized that some of these policies were economically pragmatic. So let our president look at the issue of the flexibility of the foreign exchange. Do you know what he would find? What he would find is that what he wants to achieve in diversification is not going to be possible without a competitive exchange rate policy. Oh. What he wants to achieve in terms of diversification of the economy and the productivity and the competitiveness of the economy is not possible without a flexible exchange rate policy, because such an exchange rate policy would enable the kind of adjustment that is necessary and the responsiveness the kind of response that economic actors would need to make. Right. With his peg, what basically has happened is that we've frozen the supply of foreign exchange into the system. So we're busy working around the demand, whereas what we need to do is to provide the space for the supply and the demand to interact in the way that the pricing can adjust itself as inflows and outflows interact.
There was some interesting thing that a lot of Nigerians were expecting from the president's speech. He had said when he was in the United States that he was going to make announcements of looters and the looted funds. That was clearly missed out in that speech. What happened, Mr. Additional?
Yes, some issues of respect for rule of law came in. The president has said, yes, he was going to name names and even give account numbers and all that. But then it needed to be looked at again.
But again, one would expect that if you made a promise as a leader and you're not going to yield to it again, you should make a mention and tell Nigerians the reasons why you're not making it.
Yes, you know what we'll obtain now? He said the Minister of Information will release figures and update as necessary. That is what will happen now.
A lot of people have said, and of course you have heard and read, about the level of prosecution and no convictions yet in the last 1 year. And for a president who said, I want to fight corruption to his knees, in 1 year, no single convictions. Are you worried?
Yeah, but the truth is that the executive does not convict. The executive does not convict. The judiciary.
No, the point is that if you say you're going to the market, and unfortunately, you're not able to get to the market. My point is that if that is your aim, what is the president doing to make sure that he said he wants to fight corruption, but unfortunately, the corruption fight is nowhere.
Actually, I can speak on this one, because, frankly speaking, I think we should hold to task the judiciary in this country. I think we've been giving them such a pass for too long. And in the same way that citizens are now more ferocious in scrutinizing the activities of the legislature that used to have a pass. In the past, the legislature just did their own thing. Nobody asked any questions. More people are just poking their noses into the activities of the legislature. It's important. The same thing should happen with our judiciary. The president alone cannot tackle corruption in this country. We need the judiciary. We need law enforcement that is motivated, properly equipped, with the capacity to detect crime, to investigate crime, to prepare prosecution in a way that would get conviction. But we need to start with an example of our judiciary. Now, if our judiciary in a systemic corruption environment is immersed in corruption, it's going to be difficult for them to be able to do the...
Let me come to you, Mr. Iwani, but quickly to tell our viewers that whatever you are doing right now, we are taking note. For example, your polling, your voting, we're taking note of them. Let me show you just what is happening. That's how it's grown now, how you are rating and voting for President Muhammadu Buhari, whether he has performed well or not. I'm not going to give details of this is live, how it's happening right now on those platforms. Just go ahead and keep voting. At the end of the program, we will give you details. Just before I go to Mr. Debo Adeniro of the Coalition Against Corrupt Nigerians, Mr. Iwani, do tell me, at these rates that we're going in fighting corruption, what are your thoughts about the mechanisms that are being employed?
First and foremost, let's address, there are two types of corruption. There's financially induced corruption, and there's structurally induced corruption. Financially induced corruption is a function of greed and deviant behavior in the DNA of people and all of that. There's also the fact that if there's a structurally induced corruption because of rent-seeking structures, barriers to entry, influence peddling, and all of that. But the fight against corruption and the fight against corrupt people